Better, faster, and cheaper. Marketing leaders' goals haven't changed, but they are now being driven by the surge of AI and agents. They aren't being asked to do new things. They are evaluating whether they can be done differently, especially how can their teams be even more efficient. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dialani. Agentic marketing automation can help by doing critical work needed to get results across complex work streams. We are at a point where we need to rethink automation not just as a subcategory of tools focused on B2B sales, but as the real payoff of agentic AI. Let's welcome Rajesh Jain, founder of Netcore Cloud, to take a deeper look at how this new technology can help you fulfill your ambitious strategies. Hi, Rajesh. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi Priya, thanks for inviting me.
Likewise, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast today, Rajesh. And I think, to be honest, even I haven't come across this agentic marketing automation. And I'm sure our listeners will also be equally excited to understand about this and its implications and how would the future be like in terms of marketing automation. So let's start our discussion by setting our foundation right and understanding more about Netcore Cloud. So we want to understand about the company, its specialization, and along with that, Rajesh, we also want to know about you. How has the journey been till date? What led you to, found Netcore Cloud, and what exactly is your role at the company today?
Okay, so I'll just give a background about me and then we can talk about Netcode. So I'm a serial tech entrepreneur for the last close to 34 years. And I founded India's first internet portals in the late 90s. And that was my first exit. So between 95 and 99. So Kill.com, Coach.com, Samachar.com, they were quite well known among NRIs at that time. And I started Netcore just around 98, 99. So I've been an entrepreneur for all these years. And the way I like to think about entrepreneurship, and I wrote a book about 3 years ago, is how can you build proficons? So for me, proficons are companies which are bootstrapped, which are, of course, profitable and scaled. So as opposed to the unicorn thinking, which is there where course, there's a tendency to raise a lot of money. Proficons tend to take a little different approach in life. My first company, India World and Netcore, both have been proficons in the sense that we haven't raised external capital and have built reasonable scale. What Netcore does is essentially help B2C brands with customer communications and customer engagement. So many of the large B2C brands need to send out communications to their customers. So SMSs, WhatsApps, emails, now RCS messages. And then when they come onto their properties, the website or the app, then how do you engage with them? How do you personalize the messaging to them? And this is all broadly in the world of Martech as opposed to AdTech. AdTech is all about acquisition. Martech is about retention. So the mantra that I like to tell marketers is how can you ensure that you never lose customers and you never pay twice? Because my belief is that one of the biggest hurdles to sustained profitability in brands is the fact that companies, marketers are spending a lot of money reacquiring the same customer again and again. So if you can actually ensure that when a customer comes in, you can build a deep relationship with that customer, know about the customer, what we call zero party data, plus of course the first party data, and then personalize the messages that they are getting, personalize the recommendations that are going out. I think then you can maximize lifetime value and minimize CAC, the cost of the customer acquisition cost. And I think that spread is what can drive business profitability. So that's really what Netcore helps brands do.
Thank you for that overview, Rajesh. And we're really glad to understand about the company, its offerings, and how it is shaping the long-term vision and ensuring a scalable impact. With that context in place, let's move forward and explore this in more detail. Now, if you look at the full history of advertising, from the Mad Men days to the first TV ad. Digital marketing as a concept is relatively new to the scene. IBM launched the first computer just shy of 40 years ago in 1981. and the internet wasn't accessible to the average person until the late 90s. So, as digital marketing tactics and channels started to emerge, marketers were hooked. For the first time, they could see metrics like reach, frequency, impressions, which was pretty much revolutionary, I believe. And as digital marketing evolved and grew more sophisticated, it started to become apparent that clicks are not equivalent to sales. So, ad waste emerged as a primary problem to solve, and also with that, better measurement. So, we have often heard about the concept of ad waste. What exactly does this term mean? And why do you believe that nearly $500 billion in marketing spend globally is going towards reacquiring customer brands already had?
Yes. So if you think about marketing, digital marketing especially, there are only three ways to get people to your properties because that's where you're doing the transactions. So either you have great branding, so people come on their own, okay, like we open a Flipkart or a Amazon or a Zomato, Swiggy app completely ourselves. We don't necessarily need prompting. So that's great. The second approach, and not everyone, of course, has got top of mind recall. We have few brands that we will remember automatically and go sort of instinctively. Therefore, the second way is, of course, acquisition. So that's the world of ad tech. So there are ads on Google, Meta, etc., other platforms where those ads are really helping bring people back to the brand's properties. And the third is the push messages that are sent out to existing customers. Because for push messages, whether they are notifications on the app or emails, SMSs, WhatsApps, you need some sort of digital identity, either a app installed or a mobile number or an email ID. And these push messages essentially then work to bring people back to the property. And that's the world of Martech. Now, what's typically happening is in the marketing budget, it is the analysis that we have done at Netcore, about 90% of marketing budgets are spent on acquisition and about 10% on CRM slash Martech. So acquisition is all about getting in new customers. Now, the problem is that if you've been in business 2 or 3 years, you pretty much reached out to a lot of your potential target audience. And what you're really doing is retargeting and reacquiring the same customers again and again because these customers have become either inactive, dormant, or they have churned. So 70 out of that 90 is actually going in reacquiring existing customers who should never really have been lost in the first place had the marketers or had the brands built good relationships with them. And that's where I came up with this concept called ad waste. And that's where this $500 billion number comes in. My belief is that 70% of all digital marketing is really spent reacquiring existing customers. So 700 billion is really what is spent on digital marketing. 500 billion is the money which really should have been on brand P&Ls and it's now on the ad tech P&Ls. And this is the real problem. This is why a lot of the B2C, D2C brands do not have higher profitability because they are the core of the problem is A, they should never be losing customers, and B, they should never be paying twice to reacquire that customer. And that is where I think the real opportunity in marketing is. And that's where AI, I think, is going to be the game changer going forward.
Pretty much alarming, I would say. And I think, what stands out to me is how this isn't just a budgeting inefficiency. It's actually a very deeper issue on how they are framing their marketing strategies and, even misaligned incentives with marketing teams and platforms. So, and yet again, it raises a very important question. Are brands today over optimizing for short term metrics like clicks and conversions while losing sight of long term customer relationships and retention? And if that's the case, then solving ad waste isn't just about reducing spend. It's about rethinking how brand should approach the entire customer life cycle, engagement, and even loyalty.
You are absolutely right. See, what's really happening here is that ad tech is actually quite easy in
Yeah.
the sense that you call up an agency or you put your budgets into Google and Meta, you tell them how many clicks you want, they will take care of the optimization. And in fact, even now the creatives, etc., can all be created by Google Meta's AI engines. I mean, they know us better than we know ourselves. So that's easy. The problem is you end up effectively paying a revenue tax every time you are using the ad tech platforms. So when you say you've got a ROAS of 4, effectively it means that you're paying a 25% tax on conversion. Now you can pay that for the first time, but you have to pay that every time you want to target a customer. That is a problem. And that is where I think Martech has to play a critical role. And like you said, it's not just about the short term. Martech gives its results over time because you got to build relationships. Now, the Kirana store person actually builds relationships. They get to know us. But that's hard work. Today in Martech, you've got to figure out how to collect data from for each person that you know, for each of your customers. Second is you've got to create then segments based on the data that you've got. Third is you've got to then create journeys for these customers. Then you have to also create content for the different segments that you have. And then the analytics. And this is daily work. So the problem is that while many companies buy the Martech platforms, it's like buying a Ferrari, but then you have like a Mumbai taxi driver operating it because you're not using the full power of the platform that's available. In most cases 30-35% features of the platform are used because it's just it's a lot of daily drudgery in terms of analytics, content creation, etc. So and what we have seen is that even if people have say few million customers, they cannot create more than 8 to 10 segments. And these are very static segments. Someone creates it and then they sort of stay that way. And that the end outcome of this is that we as customers get very generic messages, get non-personalized messages, and we are not excited by those. So brands have actually trained us to ignore their communications because they are not personalized, they are not relevant. And therefore, we sort of drift away. And I have this framework, what I call best, rest, and next for customers. While there'll be about 20% customers who are loyal and who are generating most of the revenues, the other 80% are the rest. So they are drifting, they are dormant, inactive, churned, and eventually they end up in the next bucket for being retargeted for reacquisition. So now what needs to happen is how can brands really use, while humans, there are limitations on what people can do in terms of content creation, etc. This is where generative AI and agentic marketing actually comes in now, because not only can they stop this drift, they can actually collect additional zero-party data, which is the underlying premise for doing better personalization and recommendations.
Right, definitely, Rajesh. That's pretty insightful. And you, of course, touched down on a couple of aspects. First, being the agentic marketing, and of course, how AI is expanding the creative range of what marketers can reasonably attempt. And of course, that abundance is pretty much visible in the MarTech landscape. Over the years, number of tools has exploded into tens of thousands, with AI kicking off a fresh growth sport. And now we have agentic marketing, which I believe is a relatively new idea. What inspired you to develop this concept, and how does it challenge the traditional campaign led marketing approach?
So what we are now seeing in the last year or so is that agents are now proliferating in all aspects of our life, of course, in the sense that even coding agents, etc. At work, we have effectively co-pilots. So it's almost like a co-intelligence working with us. So the way to think about agents in the marketing context is at two levels. First is that what our operations are being done by the marketing team, how can those be automated? And some of those, in fact, can be done autonomously also. So to give you examples of agents, insights agent. So you did a campaign. Now, what happened in that campaign and what should you do next? The insights agent can actually save a few hours a week because you don't have to, the insights agent will give you answers. Otherwise, you would have to go through multiple dashboards of different campaigns done and figure out what worked, what didn't work, which creative gave a better response, and so on. The insights agent comes in there. The segmentation agent, the segments or the audience agent. Which segment should you create from all your customer base? Rather than being a few fixed segments, you can have now dynamic segments being created every couple of weeks, for example. Then comes the content agent. If you now have, instead of 10 segments, you have maybe 50 segments or 25 segments, and these are changing segments, dynamic segments. You need now content creation for each of these segments to do better personalization. So that's the third type of agent which comes in. Fourth is decisioning. That what is it that you need to send to each of these individuals? What time, what channel should you send the message on? very hard for humans to do it, very hard to make it completely rule based. Then it becomes very hard to send out in real time. You need actions very quickly because customer is there on the property. What message do you show? What offer do you give, etc. Then you also have shopping agents. And then you have the shopping agents basically help customers ask questions in the search boxes and the search boxes that are there on the websites or apps rather than trying to just type keywords. So I'm going for a party on Friday evening. Can you suggest me nice dresses? Now, that's much better than saying party dresses, just that. You can actually give a lot more information in the natural language rather than just a couple of keywords that's there. And then because these are all agents, sort of right now distinct agents, you need like a co-marketer, you need an orchestrator agent, which can then take up goals to deliver the outcome. So this becomes a single agent system, morphs into a multi-agent system with a co-marketer. That's where you get your autonomous marketing. And that's where I think the real power of the future is. And that's where Martech, I think, will become central going forward for every marketing team because it takes away the drudgery and it will help cut down the ad waste because this is where you can actually maximize LTV from every customer. By eventually, it's a simple thing. What we always have been saying for the last probably 20 years, right message, right person, right time, right channel. That's really what marketing is about. So what's the next best action? If this can be done, I think this is the real opportunity for, like what you said earlier, impact brand profitability. So it's not just about sending out a few campaigns. It's about marketers, CMOs can morph themselves into chief profitability officers on the back of AI.
Definitely, Rajesh. And it almost feels like, we are moving from planning marketing to engineering marketing ecosystems where intelligence is continuously learning from consumer behavior rather than reacting after the fact. And in that sense, agentic marketing doesn't just optimize performance, it fundamentally changes the role of marketers themselves. And I think that's a very powerful shift, especially in a world where customer expectations are evolving faster than ever. Moving ahead, Rajesh, now the last generation of enterprise software created $1 trillion ecosystem by becoming systems of record. I mean, we have Salesforce for customers, Workday for employees, SAP for operations. So, in that way, we are growing pretty much fast. The data agents need already lives somewhere, and agents just need better access to it, plus better governance and explicit rules about which definition wins for which purpose. So I think agents don't just need rules, they need access to the decision traces that show how rules were applied in the past, where exceptions were granted, how conflicts were resolved, who approved what, and which precedents actually governed reality. You have always spoken about context graphs and memory layers enabling AI systems to understand customer history and behavior. What does this shift marketing from simple automation to truly intelligent decision making?
Great question, Priya. I think, and what you've brought in is really the depth that future agentic marketing platforms are going to bring in for the true N is equal to one for one-to-one personalization and in real time. So, what was missing in marketing in Martech side all along has been really the context that whenever a broadcast campaign sent out or just pure rule based messages sent out, the real time context is not really being captured. And like you said earlier, it's the context with the decision traces. So let's say I sent out a message to a customer. Now, what was the thinking behind sending out that particular message from maybe 5 others or 10 others which I could have sent out, or a specific offer which was sent out? Then comes the decision trace, that what was the customer's actions after that message was sent out, and that then drives the feedback loop, which effectively drives the reinforcement learning that improves the system on a continuous basis. So I think this is where really the opportunity is going to be going forward, that there's the data layer, then you have the sort of semantic layer, just understanding the data feels better. Then you have the The third layer becomes the context graphs. Fourth becomes the decisioning engine, like the intelligence layer that you've said. And then finally becomes the feedback loop, that what happened after the message was sent out, which really drives the learning. Now, this is all beyond humans to basically do. And this is the real power of where the agentic layer comes in. If I just extrapolate or extend this a little further, I think what you will see going forward is a twin for every customer sitting inside the Martech system. So today, every Tesla car, for example, has a twin. Every GE airline engine has a twin. In many cases, this is used for predictive maintenance, etc. But it also creates very interesting new business models. So like GE now has a model where it does not sell the engine, but it essentially sells you air miles. So that the GE's responsibility is to make sure the engine is always in perfect working condition and the plane is flying. I think you'll see the same thing happen here, because what marketers really want are outcomes. Today, if you see Martech, it's based on inputs, monthly transacting users, how many messages sent, and so on. But what everyone wants is this really helping me grow my revenues? And that is where I think it's, to use a financial term, it is alpha. You have the baseline returns, then you have the alpha. Alpha is what Martech companies of the future will have to build. And the key layers which will help them build are the context graphs, the decision engines. Of course, the data layer is a given, but these and the agents, both the marketing department agents and the twins, all of this really creates a phenomenal new world of Martech, which can then take a sword to the ad waste that we spoke about in the beginning.
Definitely, Rajesh. And I think your overall response highlights how AI is moving beyond just executing predefined rules to actually understanding the customer in a much deeper and a more contextual way. And I think marketing is no longer about isolated touch points, but about evolving relationships which are primarily shaped by memory and context. And I think that naturally raises an interesting thought. As AI begins to make these nuanced decisions, the role of marketers also evolves. And that's, I mean, my next question is based on this because I want to specifically talk about the role of CMOs here. CMOs are, of course, aware of this shift underway. More than 80% report having growing confidence about AI's potential, even as they acknowledge the disruptive pressure it creates. So, as AI takes over operational tasks, how do you see the role of CMO evolving in the agentic marketing world?
Yeah, so there will always be humans in the loop. So, but the role of the humans will change. The CMOs can now basically just give directions. Okay, Valentine's Day is coming up or Mother's Day is coming up. Now, can you figure out the best customers, what offers to send to each customer, rather than the generic campaigns which have been done in the past? And marketers can now strategize, can set goals, which the AI agents can essentially do. The way marketers, I think, need to start thinking, and this is a great opportunity for marketers, is they have to think of themselves as chief AI and chief profitability officers of the company. Marketers historically have just focused on growth. Okay, you want the CEO comes and says, okay, I need 10% or 20% more revenues next quarter. So marketers' approach is, yeah, give me a little more budget. I'll effectively they spend it on the ad tech platforms, get the clicks. So next year onwards, you see the growth, revenue growth happening, but that's coming at a cost. Like we said earlier, a lot of that is really ad waste, and it impacts profitability. But if marketers now make a shift in the frame of reference, saying, look, I just don't want to deliver growth. This is an opportunity for me to drive profitable growth. Very few marketers actually become CEOs. In fact, Adweek had an article, I think, recently where they spoke about the fact that CMOs are driving growth, but why are so few of them becoming CEOs? And I think the reason for that is what marketers are missing out on is the responsibility for profitability. So profit should not just be the focus for, say, a CFO or the CEO. Marketers are uniquely positioned now, thanks to all the AI innovations, to essentially say that, look, I am the custodian of the customer. I know our business's customers the best. I can drive business profitably and therefore position themselves to become CEOs. Very few CMOs actually make it to CEOs. And I think this trend can actually shift. So marketers really need to reinvent themselves, building on AI and building on a focus on profitability. And I think it's a great opportunity for CMOs now.
Definitely, Rajesh, that's a powerful take here. And I think the CMO's role is shifting from more of execution to orchestration. It almost feels like the modern CMO is evolving into a systems thinker, someone who isn't just asking what message to put out, but how machines, data flows, and human insights come together to deliver that campaign or that message in the most impactful way. Great.
Absolutely right, Priya.
Yes, and on the other hand, I also believe that the rapid rise of AI agents is also changing how B2B software vendors capture value. Over the past decade, pricing strategies have evolved significantly from perpetual licenses to subscription models and increasingly now towards consumption-based pricing. I think more customers want to pay solely for the measurable outcomes their software delivers. You have always suggested that software pricing models could move from subscription based to outcome based pricing. How would this shift would change the relationship between technology providers and businesses?
Yeah, I think it's a very relevant question given what we are seeing is happening to valuations of SaaS companies and also sort of the fear that AI will leave a lasting impact or will hurt software companies, SaaS companies especially. So I think there are two things that SaaS companies need to do going forward. So track one is what they are doing today. Of course, you can't just make a shift overnight. So it could be pricing based on seats. This could be pricing based on subscriptions, messages sent, monthly transacting users, like I said earlier in Martech. But what they need to think about is a track two. Track two has new business models and new revenue streams. And the first one is exactly what you suggested, which is that can SaaS companies start pricing based on outcomes? So it's the alpha beta carry equivalent, which hedge funds do. So if the market is giving 10% return, the hedge fund only gets compensated on a carry or a percentage if they are giving more than 10%. So the alpha beyond the 10%. So alpha is, say, if it's 12%, the alpha is 2% out there. And I think today, thanks to the tech that's available, and especially the agentic platforms, Martech platforms, and therefore, and I think it applies in every industry, have to start shifting to outcome-based pricing, have to think about value delivery. So you need to create the equivalent of value delivery hubs internally. The customer success teams have to become, in a way, Martech growth engineers, almost like how Palantir has these forward deployed engineers. So these Martech growth engineers really understand the business and can help generate better ROI or better outcomes and then get compensated based on the alpha that I just mentioned. So that's the first, I think, new model that needs to get created. Second is, especially for B2B companies selling to B2C companies, can they look at advertising generated from attention of end customers as a potential advertising model? So to give you an example, one of the ideas that I've been working on is, can email service provide, like we send out a lot of emails every month, instead of pricing for the email, can we run ads inside email and therefore create a new revenue stream where the revenue also then can be shared with the brand? Because finally it's about attention and it brings in skin in the game also from the ESP or the vendor. So looking at new revenue streams, I think is going to be very, very critical for B2B software companies. They cannot rely just on the old per seat, per subscription, or monthly subscription, monthly MRR type of models. And the market feedback actually is there. I think many software stocks are down 50, 60, 70% over the course of the year. So I think companies have to reinvent themselves. And I think it's a great way to look at sort of almost from day zero, that if I were to do a startup now, how would I build this keeping in mind the future rather than the legacy?
Definitely, Rajesh. And in so many ways, this shift could demand deeper collaboration, better goal setting, clear expectations, and more transparency on both sides. And perhaps most importantly, it definitely drives a new wave of innovation where tech providers will constantly optimize their solutions to ensure they're directly contributing to business growth, efficiency, or even ROI for that matter. And I think ultimately, in today's world where every channel is used over the entire customer life cycle, the number of interactions is less important than how seamlessly they connect especially in real time. While many businesses have been successful in using journey orchestration, there is often a lot of highly sophisticated work done behind the scenes. And that's where Agentic AI plays a big role. They can automate so much of operational tasks, whether it's content, call to action, and and more as customers traverse not only channels but across the phases of customer life cycle. Thank you so much, Rajesh, for your time and effort to be on our podcast today and helping us understand about agentic AI, marketing automation, Martech. What are certain things that we can expect in the coming future? And as marketers, our responsibility is to embrace this tech revolution, knowing that AI is a great support, boosting our ability to connect with them and communicate with and develop. Thank you
I'll
so much.
just add one closing comment, Priya. I think,
Sure.
and this is a great way for, I think, everyone who's listening into the podcast to think about AI.
Yeah.
One is, how can AI help you do things faster, better, cheaper? Exactly like how you said it, Priya, in the beginning. But the second is also, how can AI help you solve impossible problems? So problems which otherwise you cannot solve with any number of humans. That is, I think, the real breakthrough. That if you can start thinking about AI to solve the impossible problems, that's where your business can get an edge going forward. Yes, Priya, done.
Definitely, Rajesh. And thank you so much for your insights, Rajesh. It was lovely chatting with you.
Thank you, Priya.
Great. This is for our listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's discussion around agentic marketing automation, how it is advancing. However, if you prepare your business and set the right foundation, it promises to bring a new age of efficiency and customer satisfaction, making life better for your customers and teams alike. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes, and you can view all our previous episodes on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.